Welcome back to Manic Energy. This is your host, Ryan Swar. Appreciate you joining us today, where we will be turning the tables a little bit. I've been told that people might want to know a little bit about my background and my history to understand, who the heck I am. So today, Katie Brooks is actually going to interview me, where you get to hear a little bit of my background, really to go alongside the why we're here and why we started a podcast. I'm Ryan Swar, and this is Manic Energy, the podcast that dives into the fast-moving world of energy, business, and the people powering it all. From bold ideas to real-world innovation, we're talking breakthroughs, market moves, and the community shaping what's next. Whether you're building for the future or just here for the fun, welcome to the chaos. So, Katie, I'm going to turn it over to you. I don't know exactly what you're planning to ask me, but, here I am. You've got free reign to ask me anything that is LSC, Ryan Swar, otherwise, whatever.
Sure. All right. Very exciting. So I'm going to try to dig into some details that will tell us kind of the story, your journey with LSC, and then how you got to where you're at today as an owner in the company. One of those rare stories that could be inspiring, but also maybe instructive.
I hope so. Well, I can tell you what not to do sometimes. Maybe?
Yeah. Well, and we want to know some of that stuff. So let's start at the beginning. So what was your first role at LSC, and what do you remember about those early days?
Sure. I have a lot of respect for how the business started and what the aim of the business really was, even though I didn't know much about that at the time.
Mm-hmm.
I was getting a degree in organizational management from the University of Minnesota Duluth and recognized, I think, pretty early that I thoroughly enjoyed the entrepreneurship courses and things about, hey, starting a business, running a business. I was really attracted to, I think, the difficulty, the risk, the opportunity, the learning that might come with that. But I never really had a vision for sort of what I could do or what skills I could apply. Like, do I even have any skills? So starting my own business wasn't something I had considered well enough. But I was working graveyard shifts at a local steel plant, going to school during the day, and kind of burning the candle on both ends, I guess you'd say. And a family friend who I'd known since probably about 10 years old had started Lake Superior Consulting, and basically convinced me to come work for him. I had absolutely no clue what I was doing or what I would be doing, but there was something he said to me that it really was motivational. And a few times he talked to me, I'm like, I don't know that I would join the business. Probably talked for like 6 months, it felt like. But one thing that he said to me that I really appreciated was when he said, hey, listen, there's a piece of my business that nobody's doing anything with. I see it as a huge opportunity in a market.
Mm-hmm.
I have the skills, but I don't have the time. I'm looking for somebody to come in and start this and sort of run the business like it's their own. And I said, well, I don't have any skills. And he said, well, I need somebody I can trust. We can teach you the skills. And so, the other attractive thing that he said was that I could work around my school schedule during the day. I thought that would be a healthier environment. So, ultimately left my job to come work at Lake Superior Consulting as a corrosion technician. Didn't know how to spell that or what it really meant or what it was. But he sent me, the business sent me to some technical training. It was about 2 separate weeks, the first couple of months, where there was sort of certification-based training. Mm-hmm. We're still sending people to that type of training today, and where I started to learn. And then thankfully I was able to partner with, we had a retired individual who retired from one of our customers, working really part-time for Lake Superior Consulting, who showed me the ropes, sort of what to do, what not to do. And I learned a ton from that individual and several others.
From a technical standpoint.
From a technical standpoint, yeah. And about the industry and,
Sure.
How to do what he was doing. And I still remember sending my first email to a customer. So basically the first 3 months, all I did was read.
Mm-hmm.
It was almost the point where are you sure you should be paying me for this? But to me, I didn't recognize at the time, and that was an investment in me
Mm-hmm.
and in the business. You need to read, you need to gain these technical skills so that you might have value for our customers. So I did a lot of reading, a lot of education, some certification-based training, and ultimately got to the point of confidence where our founder gave me some contacts, and I still remember sending them the email like, "Hi, my name is Ryan Swore. I'm a new corrosion technician with Lake Superior Consulting. I'm here for you. You know, I got your contact information from our founder, Phil Powers. If
Yeah.
you need anything, I'd love to help you." And I mean, I was so nervous sending this email, and I remember I got a response, "Hey, sounds good. You know, I've let my partner here know as well, and if we have anything come up, and we'll keep you in mind." But I didn't have a lot of value to bring other than maybe my energy and willingness to do whatever they might have us do.
Sure.
And so ultimately got our first opportunity, and that led to a second opportunity and a third. And over time, you build more knowledge, more skills, more reputation, perhaps. And it became kind of came in the early days a journey of learning. Like I need to learn more, I need to know more, and then mistakes throughout the way and trying to learn from those mistakes. But the type of work itself, I think, is best explained by just saying that we have customers with assets that have certain risks. They've got tests that they need to do to make sure they're operating safely.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I was traveling at first the local area around maybe the upper Midwest, which expanded over time to other states, and ultimately traveling the country, servicing our customers who operate these assets and just performing various tests, and then providing reports, recommendations to explain to them sort of the conditions of what we found, and maybe some, call it mitigation, or some things we can do to help correct
Mm-hmm.
some potential issues, or in some cases just recommendations for improvement.
So going back to what you had earlier said, when the previous owner had invited you to join the organization with, I can't remember verbatim what you said, but with wanted you to come on to help kind of run a segment of the company.
Mm-hmm.
As a early 20-year-old, that's pretty powerful. It has to boost some confidence in you, right?
Well, for me, the way I felt was like, hey, one thing they teach you, at least taught me, and maybe that's just what I heard in business school, was like, hey, you're going to fail. No, I don't remember it's a high 90s percentage of
Mm-hmm.
businesses that fail in the first 5 years. And for somebody who has an appetite for entrepreneurship, that can be very daunting.
Uh-huh.
And it was like, okay, so I just can plan on failing. That's not very exciting. And it kind of makes it feel, I guess daunting is the right word. It was daunting. And so the way I first thought about it was, I don't know anything about this business. I don't know anything about this industry, but I know this guy, and he's a family friend. I trust him for
Yeah.
sure. And hey, if nothing else, I'll learn something from this, and maybe it will give me the opportunity to someday start my own business.
Mm-hmm.
I fell in love with it, so that was awesome, and the people really more than anything. But I think for him, and I do respect this a lot. It was really more about, can I trust this individual, and less about, do they have the right skills? I mean, I love the perspective of skills are something you can learn.
Yeah.
Trust and care, consideration
Mm-hmm.
for the business is probably more difficult to find. So I feel like I entered with that.
Sure.
It wasn't always, hey, this is yours to run, because over time there were some changes. I can go through that.
Yep.
But ultimately, that trust, I love the trust is given in this case. But I still have to retain it.
Yep.
And how do I retain it? Well, I show care, consideration. I work hard. I try and learn, try and do the right things, try and build our business and our reputation by delivering quality results and whatever the need for our customer is. And, the trust is maintained.
Mm-hmm.
But even reflecting on it, that was a big leap for him to make that statement.
Yeah. Would you say that he provided a clear career path? I mean, it was an opportunity, but was there a path associated with that, or did that evolve or kind of
Not necessarily.
How large was LLC when you joined?
I don't know. It's probably like 15 to 20 employees,
Okay.
perhaps. Had been in business for 4 years.
Okay.
So 4-year organization, maybe. So even that's some decent growth, right? To get to
Mhm.
15, 20 employees in 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
There was not a lot of work around the area that he was, asking me to explore. But in the early days, the company was founded, I believe, on sort of the things I was doing, or that as a component of what we call
Mhm.
integrity management, which is prioritizing, deferring, maintenance, managing risk. And there's a lot of things that need to be maintained and lead to, risk profile for our customers and their assets. And a lot of what the company was doing at the time was servicing new construction, engineering design, field level support, project level support. So I think in his mind, there wasn't a lot of momentum in that integrity management track, which was what the business was founded for. But I think as a startup, you have
Mhm.
to be opportunistic,
Yep.
and you might
Sure.
have a vision for one thing, but when the opportunity strikes in this other area, you pursue it. Um, sort of sink or swim. So I think in his mind, I suspect, and sort of what I recall, and by the way, I'm just going to say blanket statement. This is just all my recollection. Some of it could be wrong. I can't
Sure.
vouch, other than I can vouch for what I think is true, but you might get different perspectives, probably more robust in some cases. But I think that he saw this opportunity that he knew was a long-term opportunity underpinned by they'll always need to maintain these assets.
Mhm.
And so that recurring opportunity for us and that long-term thing is far more reliable than project level work that might ebb and flow and really always does in the industry. So, I think he saw that as an investment, not for now, but for later. And because of that, I think there was greater willingness to take some risks on perhaps me and the business itself.
Sure. So, how long was it between when you started and you started to kind of grow that area, or a team, if you will?
Yeah, so I mean, I was kind of a solo show. I'd write a proposal, learn how to write a proposal to a customer, send it to them. Oh, cross fingers
Mhm.
and toes. No clue about how to price it. Really, we were a small business, and so it was sort of like everybody wore all the hats. There
Mhm.
was certainly a couple, like an office manager, but in getting work, I had support. I would send it to our founders. Say, hey, does this look good? I get some feedback and refine it a little bit. I had no visibility or understanding on what costs were appropriate for our
Sure.
services or how to even price our services really. But, there was some tools that were given to me to help do that. Um, and so, eventually it was like there was more opportunities that we were winning than I could self execute. And so, when I say wear all the hats, what I mean is, write the proposal to the customer, go do the work wherever that is, process that information, write a report about that
Yeah.
information, not just like a report on what happened in the day, but an analysis of what we found, and then delivering that and trying to talk to the customer. Does this meet your expectation? Um, and what you find as you grow is that you're doing all these things concurrently.
Mhm.
So 6 months in, I'm on a project, but also writing a proposal and also needing to write a report and also needing to drive to a different state the next day for a different project. And so you have to be really well organized and plan. And you're working a lot of hours, traveling. There's times where I was gone, especially in the early days, for 3, 4 months at a time without being home because you leave for like 2 weeks and you realize while you're there that a new opportunity pops up and you propose it and then we need you here next week. It's okay. Then you go to that one and then the next one and the next one and you realize I haven't been home in a long time.
Mhm.
And so I think our business started to grow where I was doing a lot of things and we realized we needed some more people. So we hired a couple of individuals, proud to say, and that was probably about I would say a year and a half to 2 years in. So we
Okay.
started to grow in that, you know, 18 to 24 month time frame. Hired those two individuals. I was able to help train them in. We sent them to the same certification based training. And then, they gained skills, I think, at an accelerated rate because now I could help answer their questions. I was still relying on, customers, honestly, a lot of customers that supported my personal growth and learning.
Mhm.
But as well as the individual, his name was Lauren Lofberg, who had retired from an operator and worked for us part time. And Lauren was always made himself available, even when he wasn't working. I still know his cell phone number off the top of my
Mm.
head, just because, yeah, I called him a lot. And I don't know the year, but it felt like after a while, I'd call him with a question. He'd go, yeah, I don't know. Maybe try this person, which was helpful because he connected me with somebody that could answer it potentially.
Mhm.
But eventually, I remember how many years, and he's like, "Hey, listen, I can't. Hey, listen, Junior, I can't answer your questions anymore. Like, I only did this specific thing for a few years. Like, seems like I don't even know what you're asking me right now." And so it's like you have to get really creative and um, uh, what's the word? You have to get resourceful
Sure.
by leveraging a network of people. And so you go to conferences, and it's like I want to meet competitors, I want to meet customers potentially, I want to meet people who are running it to try and understand, can you help me learn so
Mhm.
that I can, help grow our business? And so we just started adding people. I mean, then it got to be 5 people, 6 people, 7 people, 10 people, until the organization, and you're not asking this, we were probably I feel like we were like 80, 85 people when we were like flat. Everybody reported to our president.
Oh, wow.
And so his job was difficult as well.
Yeah.
It was just to say the least. And it felt like we got to a point where we needed structure. So then
Mhm.
we started to kind of toy with the idea of we need leaders, supervisors, managers, directors in this case, whatever that might look like. Um, and with that, I started reporting to somebody else, and we started layering in reporting schemes in the organization, which I think this is really natural for a lot of businesses. Usually, whoever's the most experienced, has the most knowledge, becomes the leader,
Mhm.
um, and that's sort of the process we went through.
Was that an easy mindset to shift into? I mean, you were already naturally leading probably your team, but then, at that point you were kind of linear as you had mentioned, but then
Yeah,
once the structure was put in place, did anything change or had you already been kind of practicing that leadership role?
a ton changed. I wasn't initially the leader, and you know, the person it's a really complicated question. The
Mhm.
person I reported to was a good friend at the time, and then it kind of complicated, I think, our relationship now working for this individual. And there were things that they were like, okay, now we do that, you do this, and just upon reflection, yeah, I didn't know how to handle that situation. So you go from reporting to the founder and president to reporting to somebody else,
Yep.
and I had a vision and a plan, and it's like maybe that doesn't match their vision and plan, and so I wasn't really seasoned enough to understand the word collaboration
Mhm.
and how we could be better together. And so, sort of on that reflection, there were some difficult times to make that transition.
Mhm.
Ultimately, I like to think I'm better for it because I sure learned a lot through those years, even though at the time it felt like I might not have, because it was, the other side of it, which I didn't see at the time either, is, hey, listen, perhaps this individual is trying to get me to focus. Like, instead of doing all the things, I
Sure.
should focus on these things, which is what's going to allow our business to grow. But I don't know that we ever really had that conversation.
Mhm.
And so, I didn't really see the forest through the trees at the time. But, eventually I did get promoted to a supervisor. So I think I started as a technician and then went to, and I'll just say this now, went from a technician who knew nothing to a technical lead in the craft, and then to supervisor, and then manager, director. I don't think I was ever the senior director, but I was a director, and then ultimately a VP of operations, and then under a parent company at the time, publicly traded VP, general manager, and then today the president of the organization, are the roles I
Mhm.
guess I've had in the last 19 years.
Interesting. And so
So
have you, you mentioned working in the field, spending a lot of time away from home, and then also gaining your, different levels of certifications. Have you been doing that? I mean, up until what point do you still go in the field?
great question. Yeah, you get to. I remember having a conversation with our founders, like, we need to hire an engineer. They must have had like 12, 13, 15 people in the group or something. I don't know. I was like, we need somebody with an engineering. They don't have to have an engineering degree, but I think it would give us a good sort of launch pad. It was one of the bottlenecks. We were, technical decisions around um, a lot of our reporting and recommendations we were needing to make. I was like, I feel like somebody with an engineering background would be really supportive because I don't have that. Um, even though I feel like I did learn a lot of technical things.
Mhm.
Um, and he was like, I don't think you need an engineer. We talked for like half an hour about this. At the end of it, he's like, well, I still don't agree that you need to hire an engineer. You should hire two. It's like, I don't know what happened here. So we hired two, and that really helped sort of debottleneck a lot of what we were working on eventually. And not that the individuals who were not engineers couldn't have done it, but
Yep.
what I realized then was that different people bring different skills to the
Mhm.
table, and you can really get that, for lack of a better way to put it, 1 + 1 = 3
Sure.
result. That exponential result when people with different backgrounds come together. Um, I'm like, hey, here's what we're doing. They're like, there's a program for that. It's free. It's like, "Oh, no, I didn't know that." And it's like
Creating
everything I just spent an
efficiencies.
hour
Yeah.
doing, they just did in 7 seconds. I was like,
Yep.
"Oh my goodness, that's phenomenal. I didn't know that was there." But I'd say the technical learning never stops. Today, it's just pivoted
Mhm.
what I'm studying,
Mhm.
and I don't think for me that I hope that never stops. The track I took in getting those technical certifications, probably took me about 12, 13 years in my career before I hit the highest level certification. It took over a decade to get there. It was a lot of hard work, and I feel like I gained some skills along the way.
Mhm.
In what we call it as a cathodic protection specialist, which means nothing to a lot of people, but there's basically advanced levels of certification and qualifications to get to a point. To me, it means a lot, reflects a lot of hard fought lessons and learning. And in our industry, I think it means something too. But I'd say it was up until, yeah, as I got to like the manager level, I was still in the field a lot. It's really hard to realize that for you to grow, you've got to get out of other people's way and focus on different things.
Mhm.
And so, I didn't immediately jump into leadership and say, I'm a leader now. I was still probably doing a lot of the wrong things and recognizing, all right, my role now is to take care of people, not to take care of customers. So in the
Mm.
early days, like I got a real jolt from like a job well done. It didn't happen often, but every now and then, infrequently, is why we celebrated at LSC. So I think uh, readily when somebody gets accolades from a customer, to me it was like that could fuel me for a year when somebody says, "Hey, listen, you did a phenomenal job here." They go out of their way. You didn't ask; they just told you, or they
Mhm.
told my boss. It's like, all right, that makes it all worthwhile. Like, you appreciated and recognized what we did, and you felt like there was value there. And it was a really weird leap for me to go from that high to now my role is to be proud of what others accomplish.
Mhm.
And what I should be doing every day is think about how am I creating an environment where they can thrive and they can be their best self and they want to be here and be a part of this journey with us and our customers. It's such a weird transition because the
Mhm.
skills you need to deploy to do that and the things you need to think about on a daily basis are different. All the while, we're still worried about service quality and the work we're doing for our customers. So, I was wearing multiple hats, and still, and traveling probably less and less and less. And you start thinking, all right, well, I need to be in the field more because people need to see that I know how to do this and I care and I want to be there for them. But sometimes that can have a reverse effect where it's adverse and the individuals are like, that's the person who leads this and they're out doing this too. Like, I like that, but some people might say that's great, and some people might say, well, who's driving this ship if they're out doing this all the time? And it's like
Mhm.
it's a great point. I'm neglecting other responsibilities like vision for our organization, and many other things administratively that can and should be getting done. So I think it just tapered over time
Mhm.
until eventually it was very selective. Where there was a moment where I think it was in the director level, and I said to the team that I was working with, I said, "Hey, listen, team." I only want to go out on an opportunity in the field on a project with a customer if it meets one of three criteria. This is my mind at the time. If it has a lot of our employees that I haven't met or worked with,
Mhm.
because that's an opportunity to truly get to know them and for them to get to know me and understand what they're about. Or if it's a high profile project that's going to be very meaningful for our business, or if it's a very difficult or complex task that perhaps, I might be able to assist in that,
Mhm.
we might be able to solve. If something could check all three of those boxes, it's a job I'm going on sort of in that time frame. Today, let's fast forward and skip a lot of the story. I'd say the last 3 years I've gone out maybe 2 weeks a year, usually by choice and usually at a time where we're really swamped. And it still kind of is usually in that same three criteria.
Mhm.
Um, but I would say I'd never have to. It's really more about does it meet is it the right reason to get out? And to me, it's more like if people are feeling really overburdened, um, and I can support them, I should. But the hard part about that is there's a lot of areas things we do as a business, that I don't have skills in, and I can't come to aid in those circumstances. But I still need to be there to aid, perhaps in different ways.
Mhm.
And if I'm only supporting this one scope, you can easily lose sight of these other duties, and you almost kind of neglect your duties elsewhere. And so I've tried to like raise the vision and say, all right, while I want to do that, I still want to get out and get after that kind of work. It's important for the organization and for me that I sort of evolve into different things.
Mhm.
And so instead of studying that technical content, I'm probably more, and we've talked, I'm more reading and listening to audiobooks on business and, leadership and in company
Mhm.
success and growth. And trying to learn and digest as much as I can there. Because to me, that's a muscle, right? The more you work it, the stronger it becomes. Um, and the learning hasn't stopped; it's just evolved.
Different subjects, all of that. All right. Let's pick up on the story. We were kind of at the turning point maybe where
Yeah,
with LSC.
sure.
Yep.
So we had probably, I think, where I said like we were a very flat
Yes.
organization. I think we
Yep.
printed the org chart and it spanned the wall because it was so wide, and we ended up layering in leadership and then grew. And I think we were probably about 110, 115 employees. This would have been 2011 timeframe.
Mhm.
When something I didn't recognize was happening. I can see it now, but I couldn't see it then. So for me, just speaking to my perspective, we had a ton of opportunity. Like the business was growing, flourishing, the opportunities were kind of coming in, I was bidding projects and winning. I'd bid in one project work and talked to our founder and said, "Hey, I need to hire," I think I was a manager or director at the time, and I need to hire 5 people. And this is work we're awarded it. It's project work we can do. It's multi-year work. It's not like this is a 1-week thing. We need to make some hires. And, I'll always remember his response, "Well, you can hire 2." I was like, "Well, I don't understand why I can only hire 2.
Yeah.
Like we work for 5." And one thing I didn't understand is just cash flow in general and how cash flow works. Where, if you go, by the way, I wasn't the only leader and I wasn't director. I wasn't the only director looking for resources. We were so busy, we must have had 6, 7, 8 leaders all trying to hire 3, 4, 5 people. So we want to grow by 25 individuals or 20%. By the time we hire somebody, we train them, we get them the equipment they need, we source a vehicle for them if they're traveling, at least for the craft I was in. You get them their personal protective equipment, hard hat, safety glasses, vest, um, have them on the road, fuel, per diem, or hotel expenses. That all builds up, right? Those are dollars. We have to pay payroll biweekly. And at the time, I think we call it day sales. That's how long it took us to collect cash on the work we did was probably like 80 days. So it's almost 3 months. So it's like, if we're going to go hire 25 people and those 25 people are all going to work for 3 months without us taking $1 in, but paying for all the expenses, that's a huge cash sink for the organization. And what I was being told in different ways is, listen, we can't cash flow your request, even though you've sold the business. And I think that concept I just explained is a lot of reasons successful businesses sometimes fail early, because, they don't recognize the cost of success from a cash flow perspective, or have the line of credit in the background, that can fuel growth. And line of credit is something, basically short-term borrowing from a lender or other source. So we were a cash constrained position with pent up growth. And what that leads to is making decisions that you have to make that aren't always the ones that you feel are best for the business. And I know our founder recognized that, he and we needed a partner. And so I had actually become a minority owner in the business at this time. There were several individuals that were invited to, join the organization as partners or owners to buy in. So I, write a check. I might have had, if I'm being honest, I think, and the owner did a really good job of trying to make that an attractive investment early on, and convey the benefits. I don't think he opened it to a lot of people, but I was afforded that opportunity, thankfully. And I was really happy that I sort of jumped in with both feet. I think the minimum contribution at the time was $5,000. I think I might have had like $5,800 in my bank account. I was like, I'm in, and also I need to go on the road and make some overtime. What can I do here? So thankfully they created he created an environment for people to buy in. So I was a minority partner at the time, and, we're going through this cash flow challenge. He ultimately got us aligned with a partner who's, I'll call it quasi private equity, somebody with a lot more capital than we had that, I think was interested in the story and willing to come in and from a majority position. So they acquired controlling interest in the business. Really, and that transaction happened, I believe it was January 1st, 2012. They brought cash to the table with the transaction, in addition to sort of buying the equity, and gave us cash to grow. And in the next 3 years, from January 1st, 2012 through end of, maybe it would be 4 years, end of 2015, we tripled in size. We went from 110 employees to 330 employees.
Wow.
And so it was like every week you had new people coming through, and we were just growing like wildfire. And in the process, that company that came in and supported us also enabled us to start more of the back office functions. So instead of just being a business of, 3 or 4 administrative staff and a bunch of seller doers, it was more about, all right, we need an HR leader. We need an accounting leader. We need to transition and evolve the back office functions as platforms for growth. And those are what's going to enable. And I think our founder knew that, but maybe didn't know how to set those up, or didn't know, didn't have the fuel to set them up, because those are big investments. And so thankfully they came in, and I kind of look at it, it's reflecting back on the business experience again. You talk about partnerships and what success looks like. And I think a lot of times it's you come together with purpose, and then you exit the relationship at some point having accomplished objectives, hopefully.
Mm-hmm.
And in this case, I think, their purpose was to deploy capital in a way that returned while also doing some good for an industry counterpart, even though they're in a very different business than we are, just in the same industry. Um, and from our perspective, it's we use that capital for good, and then we help provide a return. And so we tripled in size, and then ultimately on January 1st of 2016, the business was transacted again to a publicly held company. So in that 4-year span, 3 to 4 year span, we were able to maintain ownership stake. I think every owner, as of January 1st, 2012, maintained their stake, to my knowledge, and stayed as owners of the business on a lower percentage, but that's fine because
Mm-hmm.
it results for growth, helps everybody in the equation.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately transacted to a publicly traded company on January 1st, 2016.
What did that feel like? I mean, did you hold on to your ownership from going to in 2016 during that
No,
transaction?
yeah, good question. We weren't able to.
Okay, you
Because
weren't
it's a
able to.
publicly traded company. We were allowed to go on the stock market and buy stock.
Okay.
But zero direct ownership during that transaction, or indirect, really. Not even really, just no form of direct or indirect ownership as of 2016.
So with the first transaction, was there excitement from your perspective? Did you understand what it could provide you, in your
No.
career growth?
No. The one thing I respect a lot too is our founder basically brought everybody into the room. This is the 2012 transaction. And
Yep.
said, hey, here's what I'm envisioning. Here's why I think it's important, why it's going to benefit all of us, why I need this, why I think the business needs this, and why I think you need it.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm open to your feedback. And we were all very minority. I mean, for me, I don't remember the percent ownership, but
Sure.
it was under 1 for sure. And just to put it in perspective, and what he said was, hey, listen, if anybody in here, I trust and respect you all, feels like this is the wrong decision, I'll walk away. And I think, and I know he meant it.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't just put out there for us, and what's the word? True intent behind it, I
Sure.
guess. And he said, I'm going to leave the room. You guys talk about amongst yourselves. I'll come back in a little bit. And we all kind of talked, and he came back in and said, what do you want to do? We'll go forward. I had no idea of the implications, ramifications,
Mm-hmm.
opportunity. I just trusted, so far, the wisdom and leadership that had gotten us to this point, and, placed a lot of faith. And I'm glad, that was earned, and given and maintained and earned throughout the years. So,
Mm-hmm.
I think ultimately it was the right decision. The second time, um, it's really different because, we're not the controlling party. We were a minority, collectively a minority group. And so you can't, in that case, stop the sale
Mm-hmm.
of the business to the publicly traded entity. But I do think we have a lot of power because in consulting, at least in this case, knowledge is power, and our senior leadership team, I think there was 16 owners at the time, if I'm not mistaken, uh, um, were all most of our senior leaders and held a lot of customer relationships. So, even though we're not the controlling, you know, majority in the business,
Mm-hmm.
uh, if we're all against a decision, we still do probably have quite a bit of power to say, listen, we're not going to go along with that. You can sell it, but we're all going to walk away.
Yep.
And what buyer would be interested in that? What are you really buying? And so, but I think we would have probably never done that. But ultimately, you know, how much influence do I really have? So I think even in that case, I didn't really understand sort of what was needed or what the decision, what implications it had.
Mm-hmm.
I don't mean financially for us at the time. I mean more like on the organization and where it's going to go. But I will say the story they were telling was to me appealing. They being the acquiring party, and we had met. I'll be honest, we had met with several, um, and it's very difficult to gauge for me when you're not experienced in this. How is this going to turn out?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Interesting. So, um, well,
Kind of went through the same thing though. Like, does everybody agree we should go forward with this? And here are the reasons. And it's different, definitely different. But I think sort of unanimously we agreed that it's right to move forward with this decision.
Mm-hmm.
And in the early days, it was pretty neat. It was good. Um, there was some individuals I think that helped with the onboarding of our organization. And then there was some change and turnover, and just that transition to a publicly traded company was I had never been through it,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and I hadn't worked for a larger organization. To put it in perspective, we were probably doing, 30 million in revenue. The organization who acquired us at the time, I think, was doing 2 billion in revenue, somewhere thereabouts. And so, it's a much larger organization, global, and so you immediately start thinking about, all right, how can 1 + 1 = 3 here? What should we do?
Mm-hmm.
Why are we here? And um, some of that vision, I think, didn't get clearly established early.
Okay.
But some of the other complexities that come with being a publicly traded company that I learned with time. I mean, first and foremost, I reflect on all this very positively, not because
Sure.
of where I am today, but just from the learning. Like, instead of thinking, oh, what could we have been otherwise? And to me, it's like, this was really valuable experience. And so, still today, I had the opportunity to work for a small business that's growing, a business that's brought on a partner with capital, a business that was controlled by a publicly traded company. And now, again, we'll get into it, but privately held again.
Mm-hmm.
And, those are all unique experiences that I think certainly have contributed to learning and understanding who I want to be, where I want to be, and why.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't necessarily feel like anyone's better than the other in those scenarios. They're all just different, and they come with different risks.
Mm-hmm.
So, the entity we were a part of, I think the vision of who we were supposed to be and how we were going to thrive within that environment and what objectives we were after, got a little lost. We didn't necessarily understand it. And what I didn't know at the time is like, and it's hard. It's like, it's still up to us to define as the leaders of this business. And sometimes the other party doesn't know. And so there were some really difficult times, I think. There's other things like you have to do different types of forecasting that you never had to do. You have to really plan your business very differently. So there's things we weren't doing that needed to get done now, that sort of become cemented as, all right, this is something you just have to do. And so, you go to, like, I think we were on like a 2 or 3 day close. What that means is you only got so much time to close every month and get things accurate. You don't want
Sure.
variances. You got to
Yep.
come up with new processes and resources to get that done. Our forecasting was, used to be, our forecasting was, I'd have a phone call with our founder and say, hey, what does next week look like? What does next month look like? When's it going to get better? When's it going to get worse? And I think he would do that kind of around the horn and talk to people. How are things going? What do you need? And for us, that was effective. But now we need to project
Mm-hmm.
what our earnings, what our financials are going to look like. And that's not something we were very accustomed. We were just not accustomed to. So it's like, now you're asking me to figure out what my revenue next month's going to be. I don't even know what my revenue the last 6 years was. I just know that we're winning business.
Uh-huh.
So a lot of times you can get distracted from what was making you successful by doing the things you have to do. And I felt like some of that happened in pockets in our business. There were certainly, I think, frustrations on both sides for us and the publicly traded company over time. And ultimately, I'd say uh, that vision of who we were going to become, sort of just, sometimes you get lost, sometimes you try and reshape it, sometimes you try and figure it out. But the thing that was hurting us was the industry was in a downturn. So,
Mm-hmm.
we went from one customer, I think was like, I think I might tell a story, but one customer, like when I first started, was like 97% of our revenue, maybe more. And in 2016 timeframe, I think that same customer was about 70% of our revenue. Fast forward to 2019, that customer was like 30% of our revenue. So, and our revenue had grown. So
Mm-hmm.
what that means is we really diversified as a business geographically in the services we offer and then the customers we service. So as the industry kind of downturns, you get aggressive and try and expand what you do, who you do it for,
Mm-hmm.
where you're doing it. At least that's what we did. And so I think the parent we worked for, the publicly traded company, fueled that. They in my reflection, could have shuttered, but did fuel that. And I think in their mind, hey, you're not performing great. Why is that? And so sometimes there was a mismatch there that created some confusion and frustrations. And ultimately, I like to look at it fondly and as a learning experience that, hey, they supported us through that difficult time frame and allowed us to become more diverse as a business
Mm-hmm.
and start to get some things figured out. Um, I had I think a terrific relationship with our founder, and in 2019, ultimately he retired from Lake Superior Consulting, and I didn't know this was going to happen, but myself and some others interviewed to be his successor, and ultimately I was hired into this role to be the leader of Lake Superior Consulting.
Mhm.
So that was a really difficult time in the sense that, hey, listen, this is my mentor and the visionary behind this business is exiting this business, and now I've got to fill these shoes. And what does the day to day even look like in this role? How do I
Mhm.
make good decisions? Am I prepared for this? Those questions come up, but you kind of hit it the way I've always hit it, which is, all right, we're going to go through some learning. We've got to get some resources and people to help, and he was certainly there to support me in the transition all along, which was immensely helpful. But I had a new boss at the time, and this person at the time was. I mean, I just got to share. I hope he listens to this, and
Mhm.
maybe he'll remember this differently. But I think it was like the first. I think company at the time was like 330 people, and it was like one thing I respected. He's like, hey, I'm like day one in the job of the transition time frame. Now I'm kind of in the role, but not really yet in the role. And he had flown up from Houston, and he's like, I'll meet you first thing Monday morning. Flew up on a Sunday to meet me Monday. I like that. And I get a Monday morning, go into his office that he kind of had checked out and sit down. He says, hey, all right. So I reviewed the financials on the way up here. And by the way, I had not really seen much from financials at the time. I didn't really have a lot of background other than annual results, not real
Mhm.
time, results of how we were actually doing. And because I didn't always need that really to understand the drivers that made our business successful in the roles that I was in.
Mhm.
And so, um, he says, "Hey, listen, I reviewed your financials on the plane ride on the way up here and started thinking about things. And it's pretty evident to me, LSC's 330 people, and I think you got to fire half the company. Do you think you can get that done by Friday?" It's like, oh, this job's gonna be fun. Like,
Yikes.
yes, I can get that done. Absolutely, I can get that done for you. Felt like not the right answer, but the only answer. I was like, okay, yeah. Um, so your mind's racing. It's like, all right, so 165 people. All right, that's a lot. Like, uh, so I'm gonna start working on that. This is Monday at like 8:02 a.m. I was like, I'm gonna start working on that. Um, would you mind if I also ran some things in the background, some scenarios and some plans around this? Uh, because I feel like this might. Yeah, I want to understand your objectives.
Yeah.
What are your objectives in giving me that direction? Because I want to make sure I'm meeting the objectives, not just doing the task. And he did a good job of outlining what he was after and kind of gave an example. Hey, listen, when there's no demand for the product, you shutter the plant. And at the time, we had some demand problems. Um, and so it was like, and it was no single individual's fault. There's a lot of market things. It was a lot of being part of this large organization things. We had lost a lot of our senior talent in the transition to, a lot of those pre-owners in the transition to a publicly held company that no longer had ownership stake. That,
Mhm.
that was what they're entrepreneurs at heart.
Yep.
Didn't feel the same to them. So we lost a lot of senior talent. And there's some real, drivers to the situation we were in as a business. And so can I just run some things in the background after hearing what your objectives are? His objectives were, we want to have a healthy, successful company. I think is the best way to say it. And so, thankfully, I had some partners, a couple of people. One that was real well trusted within our publicly traded company came from there, and he really helped, along with our accounting team. They really helped, and our one of our accounting leaders today, she really helped. And ultimately, we ran like I think like I don't remember 4 or 5 scenarios, sort of if thens. If we do what you'd like me to do here, here's what we can expect in the first year, and the third year, and the fifth year. If we do, and it's like that's one end of a spectrum. And then let's take the other end of the spectrum where we add 100 heads.
Mhm.
What is that going to look like? And let's kind of taper it between those two. So we set the goalposts of potential options on the table. And ultimately, the one that was kind of directed was the worst. And so we sat down, Wednesday morning and said, "Hey, I've been working on plans for what you've asked me to do, but we've also been working on some other things in parallel. Like this. I want to run by some ideas." I'll never forget. He's just like, "Yeah, I mean, you can do whatever you want. This is like kind of like, no demand for the product. You shutter the plant. Man comes back. You bring the plant back online. What's your problem?" And I think there was like a recognition that, all right. And at the end of the afternoon or whatever, I remember him saying like, "I thought this was going to be easy. This is actually way more complicated than I thought it was going to be." and how we can actually come out of this where all objectives are achieved and stakeholders are happy, with the employees being stakeholders and their families being stakeholders as well. And what I recognized was that this man did have a heart, and we were able to actually not terminate a single employee. We were able to maintain our head count, our staff, and we set some, I guess what you call ditches. We set some these are what your objectives and targets look like, and they were very clear. And it was like, and I agreed to them, if you can achieve this year 1, this year 2, this year 3, that's what success looks like. I was like, I can do that. We can do that. We accomplished objective 1 in year 1, and then we actually accomplished objectives 2 and 3 in year 2. And so, what happened was we developed a really strong relationship. This individual was phenomenal to work for. Ultimately, I made him sound pretty terrible there at the onset, but that was his role in that organization. And I think his role was to come in and say, how can we fix some problems we're having? And ultimately, I think was very willing to listen and adapt to, what the problems really were and how we could work on solving them. And then trusting me that I had a vision for some things we might be able to do to help work on that. And a lot of that was in concert with our prior owner and founder on, what his experiences and were. And I'm skipping a lot in that, but that's kind of where it ended. And from there, I think, we stabilized as a business within that publicly traded parent.
That was 2019, correct?
That was early January of 2019.
Okay.
When I was in this role.
Okay.
And then so our founder ultimately retired, and and I like to think when I talk to him, he looks back at, with pride on sort of what, and this isn't just a me story, by the way, there were so many people that were involved in making all that come together. It's certainly a huge team lift. It's just really from my perspective. So, and so, I started working for this individual. Eventually, he exited that organization. I worked for a short period for the CEO of the publicly traded parent. He actually moved on from the business, and a new CEO came in, and so now we're an organization within the parent company. A much smaller one, but I was reporting to the CEO, and there's a lot of conversation around the time. And I think when he came in, there was a lot of, what's the strategic plan with this business? What are we going to do? And what's the right fit? Who are we? So I think there's a lot of identity conversations, and ultimately he could have come in and said, listen, Ryan, I don't think you fit our who. You don't fit our identity. A lot of respect for this individual too, because he said to me, I still remember, he said, hey, who do you want to be? Who do you want LSC to be? What are your ambitions and goals? And, and my response was, or whatever you tell me they need to be, sir. Rah, company man, like I'm drinking the Kool-Aid. We're here. I want to thrive in this environment, whatever environment I'm in, that's where I'm supposed to be. And I need to thrive in it. There's too many lives at stake. There's too much at stake was my perspective, and whatever you need from me, I'll do it. And it was like, time out. That's not what I want. You go home, think about it. I need answers that are honest from you, and tell me about this. So I did. I went to the hotel room. I sat there. I wrote a bunch of pages about who do I want to be? Who do I want LSC to be? Came back and basically said, hey, listen, I don't think LSC fits the strategic framework of the vision of this organization. He said, I agree. Yeah, I feel that way too. So what do we do about that? And there's a lot of power in that, because he made me do the work, which was very collaborative in retrospect. And it could have been a very different, hey, listen, you don't fit it. We're selling you, which puts me in a low worth feeling situation. And I'm not sure that he and I have never talked about this, by the way, but that was my interpretation of it afterwards. Like, that was a power move. Like, I just got power moved. Yeah. Like, and I'm on board. I'm an advocate for this. I'm excited about it. Yeah. And it was all secret. So ultimately we presented to the board, got board approval to sell this business to Transact Lake Superior Consulting. And then went through a very, for me, very daunting experience of how do you sell a business from a publicly traded company? It was very regimented, very planned. And I don't think we have time to go into the entire process of that, but I've had a heck of a lot of learning. And ultimately, I think what I'll say is that, you go to market, you basically, not just to look under the hood, you show all the engine parts. And so competitors, strategic buyers, private equity businesses, a lot of suitors that could have potentially bought the business. And ultimately, you whittle that down. There's a process for sort of whittling down the right fit, right reason. And really with the objective, I think the primary objective is ensuring that the shareholders of the publicly traded company get fair value for this business. And if possible, mutually beneficial for all parties would be ideal. And, we got to a point where we were ready to transact LSC, and, and, uh, and so it's like a year long. I make it sound like it's a lot, like it's fast, but it was kind of my night job working on this stuff in the background every now and then, or quite often. And very much, the publicly traded company gave us the option to let the employees know that, hey, listen, this is what's happening, or to maintain confidentiality. And I think I was given quite a bit of, it felt like a lot of leash, like, what do you want to do? And
Mm-hmm.
ultimately to me, I felt like it would have been a distraction. Um, would have been a distraction for our employees, because you're thinking about, oh my gosh, what does this look like? And our talent is so critical for our success that it felt like, listen, keeping people focused is what's going to keep the business healthy, which is what our publicly traded company needed. It's what I needed. It's what the business needed. And so, we maintained confidentiality for what ended up being over a year and a half. And over time, slowly brought a few more partners into it, because it wasn't something that any one of us could have done alone.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we got to the point of, we're going to transact this business. We were in what you call final due diligence. And that deal, through no fault of our own, I don't believe, fell through. Um, and so there were several potential suitors, and the one that was going to acquire us was a private equity company. One of the other bidders was sort of a private equity backed strategic buyer. There was a couple of those, and there was one that I felt like was the right cultural fit for us. And so when the one deal fell through in final due diligence, like a year into this process, it's like, oh, you've got to be kidding me, this is so much work. And I'm very novice through this entire experience at this point. And I'm just thinking, this is on a Friday evening. I get found out that, hey, listen, this isn't happening now. We want to talk to you Monday morning. And so I started thinking about, all right, I'm going to form an argument of who I think we should go with and why it's the best for all parties. I wrote several pages of bullets and thoughts and ideas and arguments. And I got a call Saturday morning from the individual leading the transaction, said, hey, I have a question for you. A, are you interested in buying the business? And if so, B, can you? And sort of the statement was, we've established through these several offers what the fair market value of the company is. And therefore, we are aware of what that would be, and we can be confident that the shareholders will get full valuation, and we're going to set that price, and you're either interested or you're not. So, here's the price. Are you interested? And if so, can you? I said, hell yes, and no clue. No, actually, I probably used more colorful language than that. I was like, yes, absolutely, and I have no idea. I've never done that before.
Yeah.
How much time do I have? It's kind of like, all right, we'll give you a week or two to think about it.
Had you thought about it prior to someone bringing it up to you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes and no. You kind of, not really, not deeply, because to me, like, I needed to be engrossed in my day job of running the business,
Sure.
but then also this side job of trying to transact the business in a way that appeases multiple parties. That sets the future of our organization up for success, while also bringing short-term success to our parent. Like, I truly had that vision in mind.
Mm-hmm.
How do you kind of get a win-win-win here,
Mm-hmm.
for the acquiring party, for our employees, and for the organization you're exiting. And if you start for me, if I started thinking like that, it's not value add mental expenditure of mental thought, right? Because I'm not going to angle towards that. And to me, it was off the table.
Yeah.
Now, I was told early on, that's not something that's possible, because, and there's a good reason for it. I mean, I think it's rare that a publicly traded company would transact to members of the organization, because we have conflict of interest inherently.
Mm-hmm.
And that still existed even after that question was asked. But it's like, okay, how do we have safeguards around that? I think was a big conversation we had, so that the system isn't gamed. Because if you tank the company, you can buy it for less. Like, that's just
Sure.
fact.
Yeah.
You might not try to build it up because it's going to cost more.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I think it requires a lot of respect, mutual respect.
Mm-hmm.
And I think those safeguards for the shareholders of the business that's selling the other one, or its subsidiary company, to make sure that those things aren't happening. I never really entertained the thought. So now it's like, holy cow, can I even get this done? And I know where to start. And I think I could tell you probably a whole episode story about that journey. But maybe I'll just hit the huge highlights.
We can dig into the other ones later
Some other time.
Yeah.
So it took a lot of people. It took a lot of people, I think, in my corner and one of them specifically was Dave Hokinson.
Mhm.
I said, hey, can I bring on partners? Like, cause I don't know that I can do this by myself. And, Dave is the only longer tenured employee than me at LSC. And, and, um, and, I'd say I love working with Dave. I feel like we're so different, but we're so complementary and we work well together. We make decisions easily.
Mhm.
It all feels pretty natural. It always has, but certainly even today still. And I think we have a lot of mutual respect for one another. I mean, I know how I feel about him, but I can't. Dave, if you're gonna listen and watch, you got
We'll
don't
have
share all
him
the
on later
secrets.
for his
Yeah, right.
side.
Let's
Yeah.
get his takes on this. I'm sure he can tell you all the dirt. But they said you can bring in Dave. Yeah, I don't think they wanted a huge group of people to work with, but it
Mhm.
was like, yeah, you can bring in Dave. And so Dave and I had a lengthy conversation that morning, and talked about the risks to our families, the opportunity, what it might mean, how we'd get it done. What types of so it's like I start researching what are the sources of funding? How can you get this done? Does that match my goals? Do we want this? There's people with money, but they're going to have expectations. Like, what is the best for our employees? If it's
Mhm.
going to be, in the way you kind of look at it is, okay, if we can go this direction, but the result for our employees isn't ideal, or for us isn't ideal, is that really the right decision?
Mhm.
But ultimately, what I will say is we found a great local partner in Franzen Bank and Trust, and I think I visited every bank that would talk to me and some that wouldn't, and very difficult, very very difficult to find a lender that was able and willing and able to do a transaction of the size, and also I think will live, maybe they've had the risk tolerance, and I think they've got very strict, which I've learned, controls around what they can and can't invest in, governmental type restrictions and
Mhm.
internal probably controls as well. And so learning how to navigate that. But I think what was really important is it felt like they believed in our story and what our mission was and who our employees were, what our vision was for the future, and invested in our people and our company and our mission. Right. So um, ended up pulling that off after about 6 months. So used private lending. Still immensely thankful and grateful for the relationship, and I like to think they feel similarly. So that's been awesome. And
Mhm.
what that means is we've got, with that traditional financing, we certainly have some obligations, but it's far less in the day to day on how we run the business. So, with great sort of flexibility becomes a great responsibility to make sure that, all right, and now I need to elevate my game. We don't have a parent anymore that has deeper pockets than us that can save us. And so that's been a learning experience, but
Mhm.
thankfully, I knew right away we were going to be good, because I'll just fast forward to maybe two last stories. It felt like it was going to, and I say I needed a lot of people in my corner. The lender was certainly one of them. The individuals on the parent company, I felt like had our best interest in mind. In a sense, you're competitive
Yep.
because I'm the buyer, you're the seller,
Yeah.
and you're trying to get the most. I'm trying to get it for the least. I mean, you can't avoid those natural. But they did a pretty good job of setting the expectation that this is what it's going to sell for. But ultimately, you have to find a way to make a deal work. I think any deal is going to have complications. I had a great legal counsel in a local provider. Hamfredi supported us, phenomenal support. Like I can't think of better value than the partners we had.
Mhm.
No way I could have done any of this alone, or Dave could have done it alone. And I think Dave was so critical because he did a lot to run the business. He took on a lot of things that I was like, listen, I need to focus on this, and I think was a wise guide throughout the way. It's like every time I felt stuck, I'd call him and like, well, you want me to call them? You want me to move that? And so we worked together pretty well. But ultimately, got to a point where I was like, the deal's going to tank. And there's some fun stories in there that I'll skip over. But it was like, oh, there was a moment where the deal felt inevitable, but we still didn't have the things we needed. And I
Mhm.
hope people from our parent company are listening. We were at a quarterly review meeting, and we're sitting there, and the CEO had everybody knew that the business was being transacted in the executive leadership team. They did not know, however, that it had gone to what we call a management buyout. And so our CEO shared with that team of my peers, but I never felt like, "Hey, you're in a room like that. Yeah, I don't feel like I'm an executive. I feel like I'm here. I can contribute. Can I take notes? What can I do to help
Yeah,
you
yeah,
here?"
yeah.
And I hope I forever feel like that. But they welcomed me with open arms in such a phenomenal way. It felt like, and treated me like family, honestly. And so, he shared, listen, it's going to be a management buyout and we're working through it, but the certainty wasn't there. And, uh, and, um, And ultimately it was like, I still don't know if we can pull this off, even though we're supposedly a couple weeks away from close. Are we going to get this done or not? And everybody's like high-fiving, congratulations, so excited for you. Takes a lot of guts to do that. Really cool feedback, right? And
Mhm.
all the while I'm waiting for a phone call from the lender, and ultimately I get a phone call from the lender, and it's like, and our CEO is like looking at us going, "You get the phone call yet? You get the phone call yet? Is it going to happen? Is it not going to happen? Is money going to be there?" And I don't know, they're supposed to call today. I get a phone call, so I step out to take it, and the individual says to me, "Hey, listen, we've had our internal meetings. We've got some news." I'm like, "Okay, good news or bad news?" And I'll always remember what this individual told me. It says, "Yeah, I don't know. I'm just going to send you an email." And I was like, "You send me an email? Like, what are you going to send me an email for? Like, can you just tell me?
Yeah.
This doesn't feel like it's going the right direction." I said, "Good news or bad news?" And I said, "Can you at least tell me on the spectrum of it's dead to it's happening where it is?" And he says, "Yeah, where there's a will, there's a way." I was like, "Oh no."
That's
And so I get an email. I'm like, "Just send me the email." Hang up, get an email, and the email says, and I'll be honest, like I'm not a wealthy, I feel wealthy, but not a rich person
sure.
financially. And so
Yep.
there's a lot of risk that comes with how to acquire a business. And you pretty much put everything on the line you have. Like you pretty much got to be willing to sacrifice everything is what it felt like to me and
Mhm.
to Dave. And so it's a big leap. It's a big risk to take. And so we were already doing that and kind of came back with a note like, "Hey, we need another $1 million from you in cash." It's like, wait, what?
Mhm.
Like, I don't have 1% of that. Like, what?
Yeah.
That's an amount of money I've never had ever. Like, where are we gonna, where
Come
there's
up
a
with
will,
that.
there's a
Yeah.
way. Okay. Like, so I called him. I said, "What the hell are you smoking? Like, how are you gonna," he says, "I don't know. It's just kind of where we're at to be able to get this deal across the finish line." I felt about a millimeter tall. I'm like, "You've got to
Mhm.
be kidding me. This is dead." Freaking out a little bit. Now I got to walk back into this room with all the executive leadership team that I just found out.
Yep.
So I walk back in the room. How'd it go? How'd it go? I'm like, "Mm." Like I can't breathe right now. Like freaking out a little bit. Like it's dead. It's not happening. And so, you know, um, ultimately, what I learned is that where there's a will, there's a way. And could not ever come up with that money. I did not rob a bank. But ultimately, we were able to creatively work through the deal. Like the only thing we could do is effectively restructure the deal in a way that all parties still, that we could pull this off. The shareholders still get value. And if it wasn't for the people on the ownership side and the publicly traded company that were in the corner of, what's best for all of us,
Mhm.
is at least that's my interpretation of it. I
Yeah.
can't say that with as a fact. It's just what it felt like.
Mhm.
And it wasn't, it was far from as simple as we're going to reduce it by $1 million. That wasn't the case, but it was like, how do we restructure this deal in a way that it can still get done? And so it was about understanding what the lender's needs were, understanding what my capacity was,
Yep.
understanding what the seller's needs were. And it became a bit more collaborative at that point. And to me, I was just like, I'm just going to show you all my cards. Like,
Yeah.
this is what I can do. This is where I'm at. Like, let's help each other if we still want to go forward. And if we don't, we don't. We just go back
Mhm.
to the drawing board. And it ultimately pulled it off. But I'll tell you that drive home, we were up in Canada somewhere. And on the drive home from MSP to Duluth, driving home in my truck, I was as close I've ever had to a panic attack, I think. It's like the anxiety was sinking in. Like, I just spent a year and a half. What are people going to think? Oh, and what I skipped was like after this executive leadership team meeting, we go to dinner all together. It's a great group. And at the end of dinner, they brought out like a cake, like congratulations, LSC. And I was like, I was ready to throw up, but
Yeah.
it was so awesome because I think they had confidence we'd find a way. And
Yep.
and these individuals that were so much more experienced, and I kind of talked to them like, okay, well, so I learned a lot through that experience, but yeah, I'm a little bit apprehensive to share it, like what they would think about me telling the
Sure.
story and what
Yep.
what LSC folks would think about me telling the story. But ultimately everything's on the line, and we ended up closing September 1st, 2022, and haven't looked back.
Yeah.
And then I'll say on September 1st, 2022, after the presentation where we announced it, I was exhausted. I felt like I don't have any energy right
Yep.
now. You'd like to think like day one, minute one,
Let's
let's
go.
go. I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm like more like snoozing. Like I'm just dead from all this work and exhaustion and pressure. But that subsided obviously pretty quickly. And it's like, all right, how do we get back to work? And reason I knew we were going to be good, and I think we got to probably wrap up in a minute
Yep.
here.
We could do a whole nother episode
The
on.
reason there was one moment, and I'll leave it on at this,
Yeah.
that I knew it's like, okay, once I sort of regained my strength, maybe I don't know however many minutes, hours, days that later. I remember I was like, okay, what are the things we have to do? Again, I skipped so much, but this is post-transaction. And I'd already thought through some of this, but I'm like, okay, we got to do this, and this. I had like 5 things. Come back into the office Monday morning, whatever, Tuesday, I don't know. Sit down with a team of folks some of our team members. And I was like, all right, listen, now it's really time to get a bunch of stuff done. We got to do this, and this. Who can work on them? What can we do? And I always remember somebody looks at me and says, well, Ryan, we already started all that. Like, well, what do you mean? I remember who this was. And I was like, what do you mean you started all that? It's like, well, once we knew the sale was happening, we got to work, we met, we started thinking about what you needed help with, what needed to happen. And I mean, all those things are already in flight. And like a wave of relief just washed over me. I was like, awesome people. I'm so excited. I know we're going to be fine because they didn't sit there and say, it doesn't need to be me. It's going to fail if it's me. But there's some awesome people thinking ahead and care about our business, want to see it succeed, want to take ownership and are willing to do the work to get us there. And so that was like it's a moment I'll always reflect fondly on pretty much all the experience, even the good and the bad, but ultimately, the learning that came with it. And that has come every day since. Yeah. So, I'm sure there's a lot more we can talk about, but that's 19 years, probably with emphasis on a few
jammed
things more
into
than others.
Under an hour.
Yeah.
Well, we'll expand on, maybe dig into a little bit more in future episodes.
For me, right today, it's really more like I'm like evolving into what's the impact we can have as an organization on our communities, on our clients, on our employees. And that's starting to shift my focus almost entirely to that and that alone.
Softer side.
Yeah.
Yep. Cool. Well, thanks for sharing, Ryan.
Appreciate it.
All right. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, everybody. That's a wrap on this episode of Manic Energy, where the only constant is change. If you're fired up, do us a solid. Follow the show, leave a quick review, or send it to a friend. Got questions, ideas, or a topic you want us to dig into? Drop us a line at the link in the show description. Thanks for riding the current with us. Until next time, stay charged.